Thank you for being here live or listening to the podcast of Jack in 60 Minutes on KTSA. So we know that after the terrible events of yesterday at Utah Valley University, that authorities have tracked the suspect. They have images. They're describing him without coming right out and saying this, so I'm impugning these words on them. But basically they're saying it's a young person. They found the rifle. They say that there's writing on the weapon and the ammo that is relevant to Charlie Kirk's assassination, but they're not saying what it is. They have some video footage and some images. They're asking people to keep submitting that from their own phones and their own Ring doorbells, because apparently this guy fled through a neighborhood. We're joined on the KTSA Quarter Moon Plumbing AC Heating Newsmaker line by Willie Eng from Blue Armor Security, former SAPD and United States Secret Service. And Willie, having heard that briefing this morning, you keep thinking about the fact that this was a murder carried out in front of 2,000 or 3,000 people, but all of them had their back to the murderer.
Yeah, Jack, this is without a doubt somebody who knew this campus, very familiar with the buildings, the traps to get up into the rooftop. Very methodical, and they planned this. They executed this thing, and they planned it. So without a doubt, I believe it's going to be a student who's familiar with that campus.
How confident are you, given the two false alarms of people of interest yesterday, and the fact that this person, we've seen suspects go great distances, from a crime scene. The Idaho guy traveled almost all the way across the country. How confident are you in apprehending him? Do you think it'll be soon? Do you think it'll take a long time?
I think it'll be soon, and that might be the logic behind not showing the video. According to the FBI in the press conference this morning, they had, really good video of clear shot of the suspect's face, and they're not releasing it. And so that leads me to believe that they probably know who that suspect is, and maybe they don't want to alert that suspect that he's been identified, because otherwise, typically you would share that video so that way you could, the community, right, the public can help identify. So it kind of leads me to believe that maybe they know who this person is, and that's why they're not releasing the photos.
Well, so I'm dumb about this stuff. Why wouldn't it be more helpful to have people's, to have all the eyeballs of the public looking for somebody whose picture they had seen? Why would that not be better?
I agree with you, Jack, and that was one of the things I talked about this morning. FBI does things very different. I would want the community to see who this threat is. This threat, although they're saying they don't believe that there's any threat to the community. Well, they don't know that. And I would want people to know that this is who the actor is, and this is who we're looking for. I also would want other advocates and people who are conservative to know that this is the person of interest. Reason being is that they're making an assumption that Charlie was the only person that he was, or that was on that list to assassinate. Well, what if there's more? And I would want everyone to know who this person is. But I could only assume that the FBI is doing this because they already know who it is, and they don't want to alert that person.
And what about the what do you sort of interpret from the methodical, getting there early, picking the sniper's perch, line of sight, the choice of the weapon? I know you said maybe a college student or somebody who's been on that campus a lot, but I've also heard a lot of people, Willie, who seem to be speculating that this could be somebody with a lot of police or military training. Does that not seem like an indicator to you, or are you saying it doesn't have to be that? Or
it doesn't have to be. It wouldn't surprise me, but nowadays, people are buying these long rifles and they're going to the range and they're practicing. And so I will say this: as somebody who has to be experienced, because you're talking about 200 yards out, and you got to understand say, for example, a 223 round, AR-15, that round tends to rise and continue to rise after you discharge it, even if you're shooting downward. That ammunition is rising as it's traveling, and then after about 250 feet, then it starts to drop. So for that shooter to know, it had to have known that. And I believe that is why he was hit in the neck, because I think that the torso was probably the initial target. But as that round, because, it was 200, maybe just shy of 200 yards, that round is still rising, and that is probably why he got hit in the neck.
I come from a place of real suspicion here, and I'm not trying to drag you into my suspicion swamp, but I feel like we know nothing about Thomas Crooks. We don't know enough about Ryan Ruth. We don't have this guy yet. I'm an amateur about the investigative stuff, but it looked like a person took one very skillful shot and then got out of there. If I'm supposed to believe this is a crazy person or an impulsive person or a mentally insane person, I would expect a hail of gunfire and wild shots going everywhere and other people getting hit. It just looks very, methodical.
Absolutely. This person who did it was trained and has trained to execute this assassination without a doubt. To your point, we've seen these before where they're popping off several rounds. I mean, we saw that with President Trump. Same thing, rooftop, right? They popped off multiple rounds. And this shooter knew that one round is all it was going to take if it hits its target. Yeah. Because, Charlie slumped over, and from that 200 yards, with that scope, he probably knew that he accomplished.
He knew he had killed
him.
Yeah.
It's really sad, Jack, that, and I'm sure you've seen this and you've heard it, how people are celebrating this assassination. And it bothers the hell out of me that people allow their political beliefs to compromise their humanity. And those that are doing that are just as evil as the person who pulled that trigger. To celebrate the death of someone that was advocating truth, was communicating, and he wanted to have a conversation. Each time he had these events, he would welcome people to the front that disagreed with him to have a conversation, to hear their side and to hear his side without arguing. He never argued. He never used profanity. And for people to celebrate this is disgusting. I see this as, there's no difference in my opinion. Again, this is my opinion. When you compare him to Martin Luther King, Martin Luther King was 38, Charlie was 31. What did they do? They both advocated for their beliefs, and they did it in a peaceful way. Charlie was never aggressive. Martin Luther King was never aggressive. But yet people are celebrating this death and assassination of a father, of a husband, of a son. It just disgusts me.
Well, I agree. And what I was saying earlier, though, is that if you and I are right about that, then look at the power and the reach and the, what's the word I want? Influence of Martin Luther King and his message. If they've done that, they've made the biggest, with Charlie Kirk, they've made the biggest mistake they could possibly have made while revealing themselves, as you point out. Willie, thank you always for coming on, being so great. Willie Yang from Blue Armor Security with us on the KTSA Quarter Moon Plumbing AC Heating Newsline. We got more Jack in 60 minutes.